I'm well. Yeah, crazy. I ended up talking with that guy who I mentioned I was doing another call perhaps afterward, and I ended up
Mhm.
talking the whole time. I spent a lot of it while talking with him actually just fixing the audio on our talk because my mic wasn't loud enough because I was like sitting over here the whole time. So I have to remember to stay in the
Oh
middle.
yeah.
Um, and I didn't end up going through it, like listening to it before posting it. I just kind of posted it. And not that I necessarily would have changed anything. Not that I necessarily would have changed anything. However, there was definitely some things that kind of stuck out to me as miscommunications. Or, for one, I mentioned that I had that headache very slight, but um, that wasn't really a huge contributing factor. Um, More so, I think I was just I don't know, in a weird headspace because uh when you said when you started reading that poem um by Yeats, the I didn't know the word gyre at the time. And
Right.
and or I shouldn't say that. I had like my own meaning of the word gyre, and I think this is kind of an interesting discussion actually because it kind of connects to our whole conversation about definitions and like iconic
Right.
language such that everybody is on speaking their own sacred magic to some or something like that. Where I was kind
Yeah.
of thinking about gyre as I've always thought of it as just like a kind of a turbulent, chaotic, definitely a liquid like has association, but really I didn't connect it with like the circular thing. And then by the time that you clarified that that's what you meant, I was kind of honestly a bit overwhelmed, like just by the number
Yeah.
of lines up in the air. And
Yeah.
yeah, and because it's also kind of a crazy idea. We were also, I'm suggesting perhaps that like, we're pointing at signs that, this is kind of wild. And um, but yeah, I kind of just wanted to apologize for my weird vibes, I suppose, but and also just explain them. And um and there was another thing, the when you mentioned Crowley, um, you said you said he's hanging out with Crowley, and I said that's a little bit too far for me. And what I meant by that was I don't know if I would want to hang out with Crowley. I didn't mean to say like that.
Right.
Yeah, throughout our whole conversation, I never meant to like. I was on board with you the whole time.
No, no.
Like it was more so
Yeah,
just
yeah.
I think
I
it was
didn't I didn't
yeah.
actually, Jonathan, I didn't well, first of all, I didn't catch on to the weird vibes. And
I
of
don't know if
course,
that's
how
good
could
or
I know
bad.
what you were imagining, what you were imagining in your head as a gyre?
Yeah,
You know what? I'm gonna look it up because
good
what
idea.
I what I think of is, and maybe I'm wrong to think of this too. I mean, I do have okay, so it's a whirl, or gyrate, a spiral, or vortex.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that like I think that I think you're. I was pretty much the whole time feeling like, yeah, that's probably right that Yeats was, you know, thinking about astrology.
Well, I could tell that when I was talking to you that you were having to process all that
Yeah,
because,
and
first of
also
all, you
that's the other,
were
yeah,
there.
that's the other thing I want to say is that basically whenever somebody starts reading, not whenever, but a lot of times, especially when it's live, like I really feel uncomfortable in this medium. Um, but like whenever people start reading it, sometimes it just sounds to my brain like wah 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 wah.
Yeah.
Like I just can't. And like I don't know if it's the speed or something, but like it's definitely on my end. And um, so that's my
So
apologies.
everything is in retrospect. All the thoughts are in retrospect.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
wanted to.
totally. I understand.
I don't know if it's vain of me to try and clarify, but
Now,
I just felt it
I
was
think
worth
it's a kind of
clarifying.
an anxiety, if I'm honest, because um, there's a certain, well, I'll just speak from my own experience. When when things like that would happen to me, where someone was reading something to me, there was this, I felt like, and there probably wasn't, but I felt like there was a certain expectation on me to understand the thing
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was being read.
Yeah, and I
And
also
immediately my anxiety would kick in and I couldn't hear a word they were saying. Like
yeah,
it
that
was
happens
just
with me. Yeah,
instant
and
pain.
I think part of that is because I'm new to the Christian verse, and in this space, everybody.
And
Sorry,
poetry's not your thing, you said, right?
I mean, I love poetry, but sometimes I'm just slow with it. Like I don't read it a
Yeah.
lot. But I
Right.
think a lot of it is the fact that I'm new to kind of the Christian verse, and I've never actually like read through the Bible.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
I know that's kind of whack, but I actually I was thinking about it earlier today. Um, that like
I
I
don't
feel
think
like
I've
I've
read through the whole Bible either, just so you know.
got you. Thank you for
I don't
saying.
think that's whacked.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not that I'm opposed to it. I mean, I might do it, but part of me is kind of opposed to doing it because I'm really about the oral tradition way. Like I've already learned so much just by listening to people talk on YouTube,
Mhm,
and I feel
mhm.
like there's something different about that quality, and because it's personal, people are
Yeah.
speaking about what it means to them, and and um and there's so many times that people like reference things and I'm just like I don't know what this means. I'm not well, I'm not supposed to be here. And um so that definitely contributes part of it as well,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it is what it is. No need to
Well, I can say that when I mentioned that about the poem, and then the only reason that I mentioned it was because it was such a stark impression on me when you were showing me the charts
yeah,
and you used some of the language from the poem and I mean that's to me that's the only explanation why the poem jumped into my head because that's
yeah,
literally what happened. It just jumped in.
yeah.
And so when that something like that happens to me, I have to follow it. I have to pursue it
I'm glad you
because
yeah, yeah.
something's calling my attention to it
Mhm.
self, right? And so I was literally like realizing that while we were talking.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I
it's
so
pretty
I'm fully aware is what I'm saying is I'm fully aware that for someone on the receiving end of that, it would have been a little bit
I think it's mostly I
unnerving.
think it's just me. I think it's just me being weird, but I don't know.
I don't think
I
so.
appreciate you saying that. Yeah,
I don't
and
think you're weird, Jonathan.
I do. I don't know. Um, um, the thank you for saying that. I suppose
You know
the
what? Here's why I don't think you're weird. Because years ago I read Jean Vanier's Theory of Compassion. Jean Vanier was the son of one of the governor generals of Canada. And unfortunately, he died, and then a whole bunch of weird stuff came out about him, and kind of he got canceled post-mortem, you know. Um,
that might
but
happen to me. I've done
but
some things.
I probably would happen to me too.
Yeah. Also,
But here's the thing, I mean, we're
definitely,
such complex creatures that I just can't, I cannot, um, because of someone's behavior, because St. Paul says, the things I want to do, I don't do, and the things that I don't want to do, I do. Okay. Because of that statement from Paul, the apostle, I have a lot of grace for people and their behavior, and they don't always their what they say doesn't always match up with what they do, right? So anyway, aside from all that, he talked about what normal is. And he started an organization called the Arc, or it's in French, L'Arche, it's called. And it's houses all over the world for handicapped people. And people, well, they're all handicapped from birth mostly, and some of them have suffered terrible trauma as a result of it. And volunteers would go to those places and live with the clients, let's call them.
Mhm.
But the object of the exercise was not for the clients to learn how to be normal, but for the people who lived with the clients to learn how to be normal. Because in his opinion, those people who were handicapped physically and mentally were more normal than the ones who weren't.
Mhm. I was just talking about this type of thing last night. I was talking about the idea of like autism and how when people make like an autism joke or something, the butt of the joke is usually on the person rather than like the person who's being kind of judgmental in this fashion or yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's why I say
I appreciate it, Sherry.
I don't think we're
I appreciate that you have
I've always been a
that you
little
can
judgmental.
tolerate my abnormality.
Well, yeah, well, I relate to it, but I also have had to learn not to be so judgmental towards people who are quote unquote normal.
Yeah. Yeah, the normies.
They're just boring to me,
Yep.
if
Yep.
I'm honest.
Yeah, my strategy with that is to remember what Grim Grizz says. He has the first clip I ever made of Grim Grizz is called the Muggle Lie. And I love the idea. And it's that there's no such thing as muggles. You know, everybody's a wizard. They just don't know it yet. You know?
Hmm.
And I love that. I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that's what Jean Vanier was helping people to discover about themselves because for him, the magic was in the ability to empathically resonate with another person, and
Boom.
that's what people who had physical and mental handicaps could do without any barriers.
Reminds me of animals. I don't know if that's
Yes.
probably I don't know if
Yeah.
that's not cool of me to say, but like
That is cool of you to say.
thanks. Yeah, yeah. That's a yeah, that's an interesting point. You know, it's so cool because it's like I don't know, I think it's important to remember that like this is so cliche and everybody knows it, but like, you know, normal is not like just because somebody's not normal doesn't mean, you know, there's something about that abnormality. It's the whole idea of multiplicity and diversity and like, you know, that there has to be, you know, in difference there is unity and in, you know, in unity there is difference and you know, like I'm a little bit of a short guy. I'm not sure if I'm rather short, I would say. I'm 5'2". And um much could be said about this. However, um the reason it comes to mind is because, you know, like if everyone was tall, what happens if we need to get into a crawl space? You know?
There you
And
go.
like and you know, so it's like you need to have the
You need
variety.
to have all
And
kinds of people.
yeah. And it does make it a little tough with in certain areas, but you know, um
Hmm.
uh
Especially if you fall in love with a girl who's like 6 feet tall.
that would never happen to me, Sherry. I never just fall in love sporadically, you know. Yeah. I'm nothing of a romantic. Who would ever say that? But yeah, I appreciate your kind words. And yeah, I wanted to say one more thing about the
Video?
about yeah, about the thing which is about those configurations. Again, it's kind of like it's really far out stuff and
Hmm.
but another interesting I mean, I guess part of the reason why I'm maybe tiptoeing around it a bit as we were talking about it yesterday as well is because I feel like people might jump to conclusions about implications, you know, and also like what I not that I am like worried about thinking overly about the impressions of others. It's more so just I want to be clear in my presentation or something. I don't know.
Right.
I'm stumbling over my words in this moment, but what I mean to say is that uh, you know, I do the question comes to mind as we're talking about all that stuff is like, what will this look like? And what is it, you know, what is like what might happen and like you know obviously I made the connection to Galahad's work and that's kind of I don't know
Hmm.
obviously there's a lot of people who might not um immediately
Approve.
jive with that or something you know and
Yeah.
um but yeah I mean to be honest that's my tentative hypothesis is that it has something to do with Galahad's work at least that big triangle um
Yeah. Yeah.
and this is super trepidatious area but I saw that that basket makes like connections to my birth chart and stuff. Like you know, there's all sorts of one has to be careful when like getting into these types of territories. You know what I mean? And
Hmm. Yeah. For
yeah,
one thing, I think you have to beat your ego off, really. Like, first of all, right? Like the ego just has to take a back seat. It's like, all right, buddy, get in the back,
yeah,
because you're talking way too loud, kind of thing. because we often want to say we often want to map something on that will benefit us in some way.
Hmm.
So either we project onto somebody else or we project onto ourselves.
Hmm.
But how do you stay neutral, right?
Yeah.
Um, so and that's to me that's what walking that really fine line, right? Is just staying like right in the center of something and not letting
100%.
yourself fall into those two categories. But as for trepidation about these things, listen, this is the way, like I had a conversation with a friend once. I think I've mentioned this story before, but um, he was actually crazy at the time because he was schizoaffective and he was manic at the time. And he was staying with us, and he was talking my ear off about God. Like I'm like he didn't sleep. Okay, so you can imagine. It was almost 24/7, but I had to
What type
sleep.
of like
So,
what type of God talk are we talking about?
oh, just everything, everything, everything. I can't even, I mean, in his manic states, he would be connecting things, all kinds of things to each other. And,
Was it like,
and most of the time I just listened.
yeah, was it relatively coherent or was it like, was
Oh,
he
yeah. Oh, it was totally coherent, in my opinion. I mean,
okay?
but I connect a lot of things, right? So, like, so I'm listening to him and I'm going, oh, yeah, you know, I mean, maybe for him, the colors were brighter, the
Hmm.
connections were tighter. And for
Hmm.
me, the colors were less bright and the connections were looser.
Hmm.
But that doesn't, like, I don't let that cloud my listening skills, right? So anyway, I was listening to him for a long time, and then I mentioned something about the Garden of Eden, and he stopped short, which was really interesting to me at the time because he's literally crazy, okay? And he's talking crazy talk.
Hmm.
And I said something about the Garden of Eden, and then he goes, "You believe that? You believe that there was a Garden of Eden and that there was like two people in it and all, you know?" And I'm like, "Why wouldn't I?"
Hmm.
He goes, "Well, I mean, isn't that a little crazy?" And I'm like, "River, coming from you, that's crazy." Okay. But then I said to him, "Well, wait a minute, just think about this for a minute." I said, "We believe," and because he was a Christian. Okay. So I said, "We believe that Jesus died and laid in a tomb for 3 days and then was resurrected, came to life, walked through walls, and ascended into heaven. Why wouldn't I believe that there was a garden?" Right. I mean, that's got to be the craziest thing, right? Is the passion of Christ. So for me, that leaves the door wide open to explore all kinds of other things. And I can hear Anselman in the back of my mind as I say this, going, well, wait a minute.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Careful, kid. No, no, no,
Yeah.
the little wagging finger, right? But then if you can walk that fine line, which I think you're doing, that's why you want to have
Well,
this
thank you.
conversation, right? If you can do that, then you can, the circle is open, right? You can go in and out, which is what we talked about yesterday.
Yeah, it's the balance, the balance middle. That's how I
Right.
understand it, actually. Even in the sense of like, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I've, in connection to Galahad's work, intuitively, it makes a lot of sense to me that the way up levels is to find the middle. The middle of the maze is actually the way, quote unquote, out of the maze, which is because you have to align with God, and if you're too far to one side, then you're kind of out of his line of sight in some way, or something like that. God can always see you, of course, but it's like as,
No, I,
but it's,
yeah, I mean, when you say that, I mean, I don't know Galahad's work at all, but whenever you say his
yeah, that's
name, I
fine.
think of my sheep. I have a sheep named Galahad.
Yeah, I think you told me that.
And I'm like, really, Galahad? You've got a Substack?
Yeah,
How did I not know this?
it's like
You look so innocent up there.
yeah, it's like yeah, it's like one of those I was gonna make like a young kids reference. Like there was this show for kids my age called Phineas and Ferb where there was Perry the platypus, and it was
Yeah.
this little platypus that would in the scenes between like the main events of the show, the platypus would like turn into a secret agent and go off and do like missions, you know?
I think my animals do that actually.
Yeah. Yeah, he
Yeah.
does have a subset.
There's a really, this is a little off topic, but I have to mention it because I'll forget. There's a really cool video on YouTube of a mouse cleaning up a guy's workshop at night.
I think I've seen that, yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah. You gotta wonder.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, wait a minute. He's not building a nest. He's not collecting food. He's not,
Maybe
right?
once,
Because
maybe
he was
he's like
putting
trying to, maybe he's
metal
trying to
into
change
his,
the world. You know, you got to start with your clean your own room.
he's
You know,
cleaning
you
his room.
can't, you should clean your own room before you change the world. You know, like,
Jordan Peterson should feature it on his channel as a, you know, clean
that'd
your
be a good
room
idea.
meme.
Yeah.
If a mouse can do it.
Yeah. I don't, you know, you gotta
Yeah.
wonder. Maybe he just wants the place to be tidy. You know. Um,
Anyway, what was I going to say?
we were talking about you were talking about the open circle and the balance, like how it just struck me and being reminded of what we were talking about. It's such a cool idea. Like, because to me, it's very intuitively makes sense that like when you find the balanced middle, then that's when communion with God is possible, or something like that. You know, and like, or just the
Oh
open
yeah, we
circle
were
in
talking about
general.
that.
Because like,
Yeah, so like the way I think about that is because you keep making this movement, right? This is union with God, um, being in the middle way, right?
yeah, I
It's a movement.
mhm,
And well, first of all, when a priest blesses the congregation, he does this movement. It's the sign of the cross, but it's not just that,
mhm,
okay? And then there's also, you know, in Hinduism, there's a centering motion, right?
mhm.
Like we intuitively know that there's a movement that does this, okay? And what the way I think about that is that this has to do with an alignment. And I've talked to Jed about this in terms of his meditation practices, right, with the chakras and all that stuff. But I don't think about it in those terms because I don't meditate like that. I don't meditate at all, actually. I don't think I could meditate, but to me, it's an orientation,
Yeah,
right?
it's like what you're
And
aiming at. That's how I conceptualize it, is what you're aiming at. Like, what's your primary focus
well,
or
there's
something?
that, but that can also get you off track. But
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
to me, I think about it in terms of when scripture talks about facing God, right? And it's what repentance is,
yes,
right? And so, and when repentance happens, your consciousness changes.
yeah, yeah.
And
And that's the open circle. Like,
but it's also revelation. And
yeah,
I mean that
yeah,
in the sense of apocalypse, right?
yes,
So whenever something new is revealed to you, something old dies. That's what apocalypse is,
beautiful.
right? So you have this pattern, fractal pattern of uh, um, orientation, right? Where everything is aligned. And I actually think that's physically and spiritually and emotionally. So, and when I think about this, I think about this as heaven and this as earth,
Yeah,
right? And just for starters, Jonathan, like this is like for starters, okay?
yeah,
Because we can't even get these two things in alignment. We can't even get our head and our heart in alignment, okay? So if we are able to get the head and the heart in alignment, facing God, which is which only happens to us when we're in the mode of repentance. That's when the head and the heart, right? The heart will be telling us forever something is wrong, something is wrong, something is wrong, like every beat, right? And then the head goes ding, oh, I know. I it's true. What my heart has been telling me, my head suddenly realizes. And at that moment, we face God, right? And we are in that alignment. And I think that we literally become physical and spiritual conduits.
I agree. Yeah. And I think that's what we're called to do.
Yeah.
You know? And um yeah, and I think that's kind of prefigured in the transfiguration. Like that's kind of
Yes.
the model
Yeah.
of what that can look like.
Yeah.
And um yeah, there's a I don't know. Who am I to talk about any of this? You know, that's kind of I worry I worry about that sometimes, but I
And why
just
would you? I'm just curious, like, why would you worry about talking about it?
I don't know. I think it's like some of this is so it's just so self-evidently true to me. You know, everything you just said, but I don't want to appear like, you know, as if I worry that sometimes I might it's the temptation to arrogance, I suppose, or something, you know? Like yeah, like it's just like that's what's up, folks, you know?
Yeah. But that's the game,
Yeah.
right?
That and that's like, you know, and it and when it goes and it connecting back to the romantic aspect is where like, you know, it's so there's such like a you know, it's not a heady thing, like you were saying, you know, like it's um
Not only a heady thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is like, you know, the head is involved, yeah. But you know what I mean? Like it's when you're actually like it's when you're present. Like that's what we how we kind of talked about it in the past, right? And when you're in the present, like it's all different, you know? That's kind of like
Like,
when you're peeking your
yeah,
head
like
through the veil.
I think it was Matt C said one time in a live stream, he said to me, "Oh, he said, I see what you're doing, Sherry," because I was trying to describe, I don't know what we were talking about, but I was trying to describe an intuition that I have. And I think, oh, well, I remember now. I was saying something about how there's just some books that I just refuse to read, right? And because I need to feel it for myself. Like I need to, and I can't be distracted by somebody else's thoughts on a subject.
Yeah,
I need to approach it with a fresh, right, point of view. And and so, and then Matt said something like, "Oh, I see what you're doing. You're you're walking around like blindfolded and feeling your way through the world." And I said, "Yeah, that's exactly." And I'm intentionally blindfolded. And honestly, like when I started spinning, I thought, could I do this if I was blind? Could I spin if I was blind? Spin my wool, I mean.
you mean
And
like literally?
and and so I tried it. I tried spinning without opening my eyes to see if I could get the same results
Hmm,
because I wanted to be able to spin even if I lost my eyesight,
that's
right?
cool. Yeah.
And why am I saying this now?
You were saying
Well,
because
we were talking about intuition, and I don't know exactly.
it'll
I'll
come
probably
back to you.
remember
Yeah.
when I listen back to this, but anyway, like Steiner talks about intuition as spiritual sight. Oh, that's what I wanted to mention. So in the Jacob Burma class that we did on Saturday, um, there's an illustration of his three worlds. Jacob Burma has these three worlds, and like there's a cherubic kind of world, and then there's like devils here, and then in between is us,
Hmm.
right? We actually live in the in between world.
Hmm.
And then in some of the illustrations, not all of them, but in some there are these two vines that come out, and on the end of each one of them is a heart, and in the heart are eyes, right?
Hmm.
Because those are those that is indicative of intuition and spiritual sight.
I uh so many things come to mind. Like I kind of want to look up that picture that you're, or like that thing you're referring to.
I know, and
And
I looked for it and I couldn't find it.
hmm, it also reminds me of I'm not sure if you've seen Grimgriz has this thing called the Beholder, which is that it's the big eye and it has a bunch of little eye stalks coming out with eyes on it. And he conceptualizes this as kind of like as the TLC space where there's like the collective consciousness and then like each
Sure.
little eye looking around the internet by itself
But
or
the
something.
interesting thing about Burma's conception of it, or the illustrator's conception of Burma's conception, because Burma didn't draw the illustrations,
Hmm.
um, is that, and this is almost mystics across the board, Jewish and Muslim, and Sufi mystics and Jewish mystics and Kabbalah and Christian mystics, and they all talk about um, the fact that deception happens through our physical eyes, right? Because we can only see the appearances, what we think. So we're looking at what we think is real, but the real actually exists underneath of it all. And so we have to see with our spiritual sight, with our spiritual eyes. And that's what the heart with the eyes on it is, right? And I remember thinking about this, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and the movie by Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut. I never saw the movie, but just the term, just the title of the film, I thought that for me personally, that conceptualizes that mystical spiritual sight. Is when you keep these ones closed, right? And that's why I mentioned spinning blind,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, um, or feeling my way blind through the world, like not wanting to read a whole bunch of books and all that stuff,
Mhm.
um, so that I can keep these heart eyes open,
Yeah, and
right?
it's also to not abstract away from your immediate experience, you know, like because what we were talking about before is about being present and like and how that's the phenomenology of when we're connecting heaven and earth. We experience that as like a rich present moment, you know, blooming, buzzing with hopefully glory rather than confusion, you know, and like
Mhm.
and um man, I lose my train of thoughts because I get so in my head about this stuff like the um and when what were you just saying? Forgive me.
Well, just keeping the heart eyes open, right? How can we accomplish that? And in a way, and this is where, like, because for me everything connects, this is where asceticism comes in. So this is what the ascetics are doing, right? We think that they're punishing themselves for their sinful nature, but what they're doing is they're they're trying to keep their spiritual sight open, and so and so they have to close off their senses, right?
Mm-hmm.
To do this. So, hunger and thirst and lust and all those things have to become quiet so that they can hear with their spiritual ears, and they can't be distracted by the world around them, so they go out into the wilderness where they can walk around with their eyes wide shut,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Meister Eckhart says, you can't trust your old eyes, right? And he actually says in that, I don't remember the whole, it's a little verse, but he actually says at the end of it, whatever you're looking at with your old eyes that you think is God is not God. Like he says that definitively,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
This is super
and
sad to me because the crux of my whole obsession is really comes down to eye contact and you know this body language stuff that I've talked about is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the essence of it is in eyes and and so I'm kind of it's super numinous and salient to me such that I almost hesitate because I feel like there's still a lot to be unpacked in this subject in general, like when it comes to uh, spiritual sight versus physical sight or something, you know, because like something about like what you're saying rings true to me, but I also sense that there's something about like a true union is where then like we see it's that we can like Steiner talked about in Tomberg. That's another thing I wanted to update you on is that I that did you watch that Tomberg clip?
I
Then
didn't watch it yet. No.
okay, the person who I was mainly a clip of speaking, I was talking with her in the comments a little bit, and she clarified for me a bit that Steiner did talk about Christ's reappearance in the etheric, and then Tomberg wrote like a more uh like seminal work, I suppose you could say, about it. And when people read that one, they it was so good that they thought it was
Steiners.
Steiner's. Yeah. Um,
Okay.
so that's the details there. But so he talks about this idea of etheric vision. This is such a huge topic in my opinion. Um, and like how it's not that it's almost like you still I don't know, man. It's like because the blindfold like we still want to be able to see each other's eyes, right? You know?
Yes.
Like it's not
Yeah.
an actual blindfold. Um,
Well, I mean, I wouldn't apply it in the sense that I'm in conversation with anybody, right?
mhm.
But as far as allowing
Yeah, like what is it that
my
we're, what is the distinction? That's very curious to me, you know? Like
yeah.
what is it that you have to tune out? Because it's not that you're just shutting your eyes, but it's like you're seeing things differently, and I don't know.
Well, here's the question. If you want to know God, do you read about him or do you encounter him? And if you know him through encounter, which is I think the only way to do it, right? Um,
Mhm.
then then you don't read about him. Like that's that's how my that's how I figure it out, right? Like years ago I wrote this blog post that, you know, and it was a challenge to myself. I need to distance myself from everything I ever knew. I need to encounter God as if for the very first time, right? And and so I could imagine what that might be like. Like if I was walking in the woods and I encountered something for the first time, I would have no presuppositions about it, right? It would just be what it was to me at that moment.
Yeah.
And then my experience would teach me from the encounter something about it that I could presuppose for the next encounter, right?
Mhm.
And so how does one with all the Christianization of our culture and maybe even our personal lives growing up in a Christian home or whatever the case might be, how does one do that? How does one encounter God for the first time? Well, for me, what it meant was I had to stop reading
Yeah.
everything that was telling me what I should think about who God was,
Yeah.
you know? And and so that's what I did. Like I really haven't read anything
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same way, yeah.
until recently, right?
Mhm.
And yeah. And it's also why experience is so important to me. Because if God is a living God, then I should be able to encounter him. Otherwise, the whole thing's a lie,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just that easy for me.
And for
Like
me, it's
I
like
don't complicate it by much.
yeah, for me, I'm really kind of grateful for the way that I came about it because for me it was through psychedelics, right?
Hmm.
And that's just all about experience. It's
Yeah.
not, it's like you don't have to be convinced at all. You just like, you are convinced, like that there is more than just the material world.
Yeah.
Or like the reality is more, it's there's workings beyond, you know, of a spiritual, it's a spiritual, we live in a spiritual world, like
Well,
that's,
here's something to think about because when I was reading Fantastes, I think we did a couple episodes with Luke and Jason, and Jason was wondering what the shadow was. And I thought, well, what is a shadow? I mean, what is a shadow? A shadow is when something stands between the light and something else and casts a shadow. Its shadow is cast, right? When the sun moves behind or a
Mhm.
light moves behind something, it will cast a shadow.
Mhm.
So what's happening there? Well, a material object is blocking the light. So now you could reduce that down to, or you could no, you could expand it out to spirituality as light, which is what God is described as,
Mhm.
right? Light
Mhm.
and matter, which, just referring back to what I was talking about before with the appearances, right?
Mhm.
How if we look at things with our old eyes, we just see matter. That's what we see.
Yeah.
And so if matter obscures the light, it casts a shadow. And that shadow in Phantastes is responsible for disenchanting. So materialism, right, is that which casts the shadow
Mhm.
and disenchants the world.
Yeah. And what is the counter to this? Iconic vision and iconic everything. You know, where um I was just making a clip of Peugeot. You remember you were talking about in the magician card, and when you did the series, that was a big theme in your discussion is
Yeah,
iconic vision. And um I was just editing a Peugeot clip where he's talking about icons versus idols.
yeah.
And the difference is that the icon stops at what it what it is. Like it stops at itself such that it doesn't point to anything higher, you know? And that's but the thing is that everything does point to something higher, because
Wait, go back for a minute.
okay,
The
yeah.
icon stops at itself or the idol?
Yeah, so you can think about like an advertisement. Um an advertisement says buy this product because this product is what it's all about. But you
Right.
can also have an advertisement that says come to this place uh, because we are worshiping God, and if that's something you want to do, you know,
Yeah.
and like it's a little tough one, but like the or just an actual icon, is like the intended purpose of it. But it's not just about the object; it's about how we look at things. Like if we
Yeah.
recognize that things are,
It's about perception.
yeah, and this is what I think about like etheric vision and stuff, where it's a to recognize the more the higher levels of reality that are manifesting through what we see, or
Hmm.
lower levels, I suppose you could. I don't know how we want to conceptualize it, but um manifesting through everything we see kind of has there is spiritual truth, there is a spiritual aspect to everything, um and it's that when we uh maybe it's when we walk by faith rather than sight, then we actually get true sight, and we can see with our eyes, you know, and um, like, do you see what I mean? It's such that uh, when we recognize everything as iconic, then it becomes re-enchanted, you know, and
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, especially nowadays, I think we need help understanding that. And that's why I'm like I feel like a
you know,
like a drug dealer pushing George McDonald all over the place.
I know the feel, man. It struck me like a freaking train,
He's
It's
like,
like it was
would you
like
like a little
open
some of
your eyes,
this?
yeah. Dude. Yeah, this I've been raving about this one thing. It's like realize, look at things differently, like for that, because that's all that struck me. It's just like the
Yeah.
depth that can open between two people when we recognize that there is a whole spiritual world right behind, that we're busted wide open for each other, and it's so good, in my
So
opinion.
good.
And I think that's what's powerful because that is how, we're talking about like uh redeeming the world, the consummation and stuff, and that's how other people who have never experienced that, when they experience us, like, and we can connect when we see them iconically, you know and encounter them at this deeper level, then and we're in that shared space together, like this is how I think that, the glory of God comes primarily through the communion of individuals, in my opinion, or something like that, and and that's what's really compelling to me about it is that, like just the implications of the depth of that. It's a bottomless, an infinite spiral as high as we can, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
beautiful.
That's what Blake saw.
Yeah,
I'm reading well, I'm not reading, I'm listening to the audiobook now of Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception. Have you heard it? Have you read it?
I've
Or
not read it now, but I've heard some about it.
it was in a lot of quotes were in the essay that I
Yeah,
read
yeah, yeah,
by
yeah.
Matthias Desmet. And I'm just like, oh, okay, I gotta read this book.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's only a 3 hour listen. So, you know,
Yeah, that's another thing. We were talking about like reading and stuff, but
and
audiobooks.
it's all about psychedelic
Yeah,
experiences
yeah.
and
Yeah, I
what
remember.
happens,
Yeah,
what's happening. Yeah.
yeah. I remember a lot of those. Really, that whole essay was just resonating with me. I hope, uh, I felt a little bit weird about the music that I put on it. There was a whole mixtape, like somebody's EP, and I put the whole EP on, and it seemed to fit pretty well, although
Mhm.
not perfectly. But then at the end, he's talking about sincere speaking in 30 minutes, and the audio fits perfectly right at the end, and and
Perfect.
he's talking about like not like second guessing, not running things through your mind, speaking
Mhm.
from your
Yeah.
direct experience first, right? So I'm like, I'm going with this, this is good enough. And so hopefully I found you all right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Oh, you know what? Just speaking of music, I meant to mention this to you a few times and I kept forgetting. I saw in your description one time, I don't remember what clip it was, but you featured some music and you attributed that music to my son, but that's actually not my son.
oh, okay.
My son's best friend. His
Got
name
you,
is
got you.
Zach. I
Did they
think it
work
was
on it together or like
no, no,
okay,
that's that Zach does his own stuff.
got
So
you. Heard that. I'll
um
be sure to
it's a
adjust that.
mad it's a
Still a
mad Zach.
banger in my opinion. Great song. I love it. I was editing our talk from yesterday, and I was going to use that song again. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. Perhaps, yeah, I think I'll probably still do that, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. He's got lots of good songs actually.
There's so much music that I haven't
I
delved
just
into.
unfortunately happen to know a little bit about him. So I know that, there is a series of songs that he put out after having some very significant psychedelic experiences.
Hmm.
And you'll probably, if you look up his disc, his playlist or his
Mhm.
disc, search him on
Yeah, yeah,
Spotify
yeah.
as the artist, you'll you'll see, you'll probably recognize which ones they are. They're fairly
Gotcha.
recent. I
Yeah.
think they have titles like Out of Body and That One From Ago. That One From Ago is really good actually too.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Um,
It's good stuff.
yeah, you were talking about Aldous, about Brave New World. That was the book title, right?
No,
And
the book title is The Doors of
yeah, yeah,
Perception.
okay, yeah, yeah, that's the one. And yeah, I remember a lot of those quotes really good. There was something I wanted to say about that, but I don't remember what it was. Um, we were talking about like the mystical experience and how that mystical experience, like um you don't have to be tripping for that to happen, like um
No,
and but yeah, but also that is, in my opinion, like a way, uh that can be a radically transformative thing. I don't know. I don't really know what I'm saying here. There was something that I lost. I'm trying to recollect it, but
yeah,
I think I'm
yeah.
gonna get it.
Well, I mean, Desmond and Huxley both, um, include mystics and people who have had psychedelic experiment experiences. And I'm not sure if Huxley does because I haven't finished the book yet, but um, Desmond also includes schizophrenics and scientists in that
Yeah,
category,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Yep, I remember
Which I
that.
thought was awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I hope we cleared up any misgivings you might have had.
yeah. I think so. I think we did all right. Hopefully it's understandable type of stuff. Um,
I think so.
yeah, and
You know,
yeah,
the poem and the observations that I made, um, I mean, I don't know how often you watch back some of your conversations, but like if I read anything in a conversation, I'll often just, instead of rereading it, I'll just listen to the reading
hmm
because I find
yeah,
I
that's
like
big.
that.
Yeah,
I like that medium, right, of listening.
yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah, I think that might have been what I was going to say. Is that that's another thing about our interesting times is that like now there's audiobooks and uh,
yeah,
like
I think that's really great.
that's a significant happening in my opinion.
It is. And you know what? I really I like double down on the technology sometimes when I'm reading something because I'll
Got
get
two
the
different
audiobook.
books going, one in each ear.
No, no, I couldn't do that. But I'll get the audiobook and I'll have the hard copy and I'll read them
Yeah,
together. Like I'll listen
yeah,
and read.
yeah. I've heard you
So
say that.
I'm trying to be as engaged with it as I
Yeah,
possibly can, you know?
yeah.
And I find I end up getting like really
Into it.
well, I just a lot of things come to my mind when I'm
Hmm.
in that mode,
Yeah, it's
you know.
probably it's kind of like outsourcing. It's like maybe takes a bit, you know, a
It's
bit
a lazy
less.
man's Lectio Divina. Let's put
Yeah,
it.
but I mean, there's a certain there's a certain correctness to there's a certain type of laziness that's very divine almost in my opinion. It reminds me of
Yeah.
the word scole. Scole, I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you before, but like
No, I don't know
scole is
it.
where we get the word school, and it's been translated as leisure, but it's more so just like abiding or just like being um
Oh yeah. Yeah,
and
yeah.
like I feel like if you're just reading, it's like kind of hard to it requires more intense, you know, and if you're
Hmm.
just listening to it, you might miss something, but if you kind of got them both going, you can get into this meditative state, I imagine. That's pretty, or I
Yeah,
don't know
like
about
I've got that.
you
I've been doing it with the Douglas Harding Hierarchy of Heaven and Earth book because it's like this
yeah,
thick and this big, you
yeah,
know. And I'm just like, man, if I have to sit down in front of this by myself, I'll give up
yeah,
before I even get started.
yeah.
So I got the audio for it and I find it really great. Like I'm just going, you know,
Hmm.
through. And he's also got a lot of footnotes in the text that are not included in the audiobook. And so oftentimes I get caught up in the footnotes, like have to shut the audiobook off and
Hmm.
I'm just in footnote land, right? Because he's
Yeah.
referring to Thomas Traherne and Plato, and
Hmm.
then I'm looking up stuff in, you know, in that world, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
going to take me a while to get through that book. It's so, it's so in depth. It
Yeah,
took him 10
I've heard
years.
you've been talking about it for a good while now. So
Oh,
like, yeah,
it's just good.
yeah, no, I'm excited
Yeah.
to hear you. It's like, you talk about it so that I don't have to read it, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And
Totally. I don't know if
again,
anybody could, I don't know if like just, you know, I think you have to have a disposition to read it. Like, and I did mention in that last live stream that I actually love Douglas Harding. Like,
mhm.
I feel a love for him.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
And as weird as this might sound, I talk to him because I'm like, I'm an Orthodox Christian, so I can talk to
I remember your
saints,
eternal. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I'm like, Douglas, I don't get this, you know, kind of thing. What are you saying?
No judgment for me,
Um,
Sherry.
good. But I think you have to be like, you actually have to love the person whose words you're reading. It's the same for me with Rilke.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
somebody criticized Rilke recently as a degenerate, right? I'm sure he had his moments of degeneracy, but I just wrote back, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a sinner,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So that's why I don't judge Jean Vanier either.
Yeah. I'm so excited to listen to this one back, and
Yeah,
I'm gonna um so many ideas always come to mind. I definitely feel like it's it's a powerful technology that we've got here of this ability to like have
it is.
conversations and watch them back.
Hmm.
and then continue the conversation. Like,
Yeah. Generate new
yeah,
thoughts.
because I feel like a lot of times at the end, I feel like the thread was at least partially lost somewhere,
Hmm.
like in most conversations in general. And it's like to go back and retrace this thread. I heard Galahad mention something about there's like an actual myth about this. I think it was Adriana's um thread or something. Let me see. Yeah. Ariadne's.
Oh, Ariadne. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh, the name rings a bell for some reason. Ariadne. Ariadne.
Something about like I
There's
think
a
it has to do with
song with Ariadne in it,
think it
isn't
has to
there?
do with like leaving a thread in the maze to escape the Minotaur. And um I don't know, I always feel like, you know, uh
Oh, I
thread
know.
keepers.
It's oh my goodness. I wish we could play a song on your on this video.
It's like a copyright song or something.
It's a song by Asif Avidan called Ariadne, the Labyrinth song.
Well, I'll certainly be
Can
putting it
you,
I'll
I
put it
mean,
on the
when
end card.
let's end the conversation and then we can play it and listen to it together because
Sure,
I
yeah.
just think it's
And
so good.
I'll put it on the end card thing. It'll be like right over here or something. Boom.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching,
Yeah, yeah.
everybody.
Okay, I'm going to send it to you.